Hey everyone, Theo here. Today I'm reviewing the Apple M2 iPad Pro released in October 2022. This review is for digital artists and graphic designers. And this review is going to be quite long, so if you want to save time, you can check out the text review that I have already written on my blog. The link is in the video description below. And just to give you the bottom line up front, if you happen to be in the market for a tablet that you want to use for creating digital hand-drawn art or maybe graphic design, the M2 iPad Pro is an excellent tablet to consider. If you are thinking of upgrading from an older iPad Pro to the new one, the two new main features that may be worth upgrading to would be, first, Apple Pencil Hover. At the time of making this video, the only app that I know of that has implemented Apple Pencil Hover is Art Studio Pro, so we'll take a look at some of the features, and those features will be things you can look forward to with other apps when they implement Apple Pencil Hover in the future. When you adjust the brush size will update beside the slider. Now with Apple Pencil Hover, you can have the brush size update the size of the cursor directly beneath the pen tip. If you are a digital painter, it may be useful to see the texture of the brush or the design of the brush before you paint. And it can be helpful to see the boundary or the width of the brush so that you don't paint or cover more area than you want. Let's try the ink rig brushes. So it seems like the cursor is not able to follow the direction of the Apple Pencil. So if I have the Apple Pencil point in this direction and I draw, you can see the broad stroke. But if I turn the Apple Pencil this way and I draw, it's still a broad stroke. So when the developers update the app, hopefully when I draw like this, I can have a thin stroke, combined strokes instead of this wide stroke. Digital painters are going to benefit more from Apple Pencil Hover compared to illustrators or comic artists who create line art. So for me, my style is mostly line art with colors, sometimes flat colors, sometimes with textured colors. So I don't actually benefit from Apple Pencil Hover. I'm not the best person to talk about Apple Pencil Hover because I'm not a digital painter. My art is mostly line art. So this is where I will point you to check out this review by Duff, who is a professional digital painter and instructor. He will be able to tell you how useful Apple Pencil Hover really is. The link to his review will be in the video description below. The second feature that is more useful is the external display support you can get with Stage Manager, which is a feature that's available from iPad OS 16.2. With Stage Manager, now you can connect an external display to your iPad and get another workspace. This is not really an extended desktop in the sense that you can drag this window to and fro from your iPad to the external display. If you want to open this app, which by the way is Photoshop, on the iPad, you have to tap on the Photoshop app and have it open here. So you can't just drag around. But the main selling point here is now you get a separate workspace. Previously, with older iPads, if you connect an external display, it's just going to mirror the iPad display, so it's kind of useless. There are some apps that can take advantage of external displays, but those apps are far and few in between. But now with Stage Manager, with proper external display support, you can run those apps full screen and take advantage of a larger display. For example, if you want to run the tablet version of Photoshop on a 27-inch display, now you can do so. You can't do that with the older iPads. And by older iPads, I mean iPads that are not running on M1 and M2 chips, because Stage Manager external display support only works with iPads that have the Apple M1 and M2 chips. I find external display support to be very useful because sometimes you do want to have some of the apps run full screen or on a much larger display, such as graphic design apps, photo editing or video editing apps. So those apps will work much better and will be more productive on a much larger screen. Just note that there will not be any pen support on the external display, even if your display can support a pen. So you will have to use your keyboard and mouse to work on the external display. So that's the bottom line. This is an excellent tablet on its own. However, if you are thinking of upgrading, I would ask you to ask yourself whether you can save more time and money, whether you can be more productive with the two new main features, the Apple Pencil Hover and the Stage Manager multitasking features and external display support. And now on to the full review. These are the items included in the box: a 30-watt USB-C charger, a USB-C to USB-C braided cable. This is not a video cable, so it doesn't transmit video. 2 Apple stickers, quick start guide and warranty info. Design of the M2 iPad Pro looks very similar to the iPad Pros from 2018 onwards. It still has the rounded corners, the thin uniform bezels, the flat side. And on the back, this is the 2018 model that I'm still using. This has the squarish camera module with 2 cameras, the Apple logo, and the label here is now iPad Pro instead of iPad. I'm still using this iPad Pro, which is already 4 years old, and it's still very usable, even though it actually has a lot of issues now. The power button is not working. I had to change the USB-C port once. The battery life is no longer as long, and I've just updated this to iPadOS 16.1 and it's running very smoothly. The display is no longer as bright as it was, but it's still really bright compared to the new iPad Pro, and I have a few scratches on the display which you probably cannot see. What I want to say here is this is quite durable. So the iPad Pro is expensive, but if you can get it to last many years, it's still quite worth the money. And these are the prices for the Wi-Fi model of iPad Pro 11 and 12.9 inch in US dollars. You may notice the 12.9 inch is substantially more expensive than the 11 inch. The price difference is actually $300. And the LTE models will be $200 more. And unfortunately for many countries where the currency is depreciating against the US dollars, the iPad Pros are even more expensive in those countries. And Apple Pencil 2 is sold separately for US $129, and this will snap magnetically to the side here for pairing and for charging. And on this side we have the volume buttons. At the top we have the power button, 2 speakers here and 2 speakers at the bottom, so you get 4-way speakers. The audio quality is fantastic. That's the USB-C charging and video port. This is a beautiful display. Listed on the side here are the specifications for the display on the iPad Pro 12.9. So this display uses mini LED for backlight, and the SDR brightness can go up to 600 nits. XDR brightness can go up to 1000 nits, and HDR brightness can go up to 1600 nits. Most of the apps that I use don't utilize brightness more than 600 nits, so when I'm drawing with concepts or Procreate, I don't really see the extra brightness compared to my older iPad Pro. However, when I'm watching HDR movies from the Apple TV app, yes, I can see the extra brightness, I can see the high dynamic range. This movie is The Life of Pi, and with this particular scene, I can see the circular shape of the sun among the glow. When I watch the same movie with my computer screen or with my projector, this area here is just blown out. Needless to say, movie watching experience on this iPad is terrific due to the visuals and the sound quality. In my review of the M1 iPad Pro from last year, I mentioned the shadow effect at the edges. It's still there, but it's not that obvious. Another issue with this display is the blooming effect that is produced by the dimming zones from the mini LEDs. So if you have isolated bright areas against black backgrounds, you may see some glow near the edges. And this effect is more noticeable when you are using the iPad at night in total darkness. I'm using this tablet now during daytime, so the blooming effect is not that obvious, but if I actually look for it, I can still see the blooming effect. This is the settings page, and here there are areas of black, but I don't really see the blooming effect. So the blooming effect is still there, but for me it's a non-issue. The colors on the display look fantastic out of the box. The color support is P3. P3 color support is good for creating visuals for the web and for creating videos. However, if you are a print designer who works with CMYK, there are a few things you need to know. For example, with Adobe Photoshop, at the time of making this review, you are not able to create CMYK documents. You can only create RGB. And if you create RGB and convert it to CMYK later, there will be color shift. Thankfully, you can create CMYK documents with Adobe Illustrator. Another thing to note is you won't be able to color calibrate the display on the iPad to match the colors on your external display. But the colors on the iPad Pro already look great, so you probably don't need to color calibrate this. Resolution for this 12.9-inch display is 2732 by 2048. Pixel density is 264 ppi, so all the visuals are really sharp. And this is the Apple Pencil Hovel. This display is laminated, so there is no gap between the pen tip and the line beneath. So when you're drawing, it really looks like the line is appearing directly beneath the pen tip. Refresh rate is 120 Hz, so the animation of scrolling, the apps opening and minimizing is very smooth. This display has an anti-reflective coating on it, which works quite effectively. I used to use matte screen protectors on my iPads, but I no longer do so because when the light diffuses on the matte screen protector, it's quite glaring for my eyes, so now I'm just drawing with the Apple Pencil on glass. I enjoy the tactile drawing experience you can get from a matte screen protector, but over the years I realized I actually prefer to have better image quality, and I just can't stand the glare from the diffuse reflections. If you really want to use a matte screen protector, I recommend you check out this brand called Super Shields. I'm not sponsored by the company, by the way. Just do a search for Super Shields iPad Pro 12.9 or 11 on Amazon.com and you will see their product on the search results. I do not recommend you get Paperlike because this is $40 for 2 pieces. With Super Shields, it's just $9 for 3 pieces, and if you mess up your first installation, you still have 2 pieces to fall back on. And if you realize that you don't like to use a matte screen protector, you will not lose too much money. If you have the intention to buy this, consider using the Amazon affiliate links that I have for you in the video description below. And this is the other essential accessory that I recommend, the Pablo PR100 tablet stand, also available on Amazon. The size of this 12.9-inch display is great to work with, and this is how big it is compared to an A5 size sketchbook. So you can see it's noticeably larger than this sketchbook. If you are thinking of going with the 11-inch iPad Pro, that tablet is also larger than this sketchbook. The main difference between the usability of the 11-inch versus the 12.9-inch is this tablet is much heavier. So this to me is a tabletop tablet. So when I draw on this tablet, I will need to set this down on a table or on a tablet stand. With the 11-inch, I can actually still hold the tablet while I draw, but if I want to hold this tablet with one hand and draw, it's going to make my hand very tired very quickly. If I know I'm going to work on the tablet for a long period of time, I will have it on my tablet stand, and this is the one that I'm using, where the height is adjustable. I'll put a link to where you can find this stand in the video description below. So it's just more ergonomic to work with this tablet on a tablet stand. Also note that if you have a case on your iPad Pro, it's going to make the tablet even heavier. Let's talk about drawing performance. Apple Pencil supports tilt and pressure sensitivity and palm rejection. So right now I have palm rejection turned on. If I draw with my finger, nothing happens because this app knows that it should only take pen input. So when I draw with my pen, you get the lines. And I can rest my palm on the display while I draw and there won't be any stray strokes. The Apple Pencil is very sensitive and accurate with low initial activation force, so you can draw thin lines very easily even if you don't apply any pressure. As long as the pen tip is touching the display, you can get a line even if you don't apply any pressure. So that's how sensitive the Apple Pencil is. This brush that I'm using also has tilt, so I can use Apple Pencil on its side to draw the broad strokes. Tilt also reacts to pressure, which is nice. So you can use this to shade areas very quickly. The M2 iPad Pro can come with either 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, and these are the number of layers you can get with an A4 size canvas at 300 dpi with Procreate. My preferred drawing app on tablets is actually Concepts, which is the app that I'm using now because I like the vector style quality and the textured brushes look really nice. And because this is vector, I can zoom in all the way without any loss of details. And this app is really fun to use. So this is the same scene that you saw earlier, which I drew in Procreate, but this was drawn with Concept, so the look and feel is different. And Apple Pencil has this feature where you can double tap on the side to call up shortcuts, so I've already assigned the shortcut to call up the color palette. And I can double tap again for that to collapse. So this can be quite useful, again, depending on the app you use. Here's another artwork drawn with Concepts. For this, I used solid lines and shapes. This is an app that I enjoy using very much. There is a huge variety of high-quality drawing and graphic design apps available from the Apple App Store. The one that's most popular is probably Procreate. There is also Clip Studio Paint, which has the same feature as the desktop app, so this is a fantastic app for drawing as well. But this is subscription-based, which means you have to pay monthly. In fact, there are many apps that are subscription-based only, such as the Adobe apps, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Fresco, Adobe Illustrator. For drawing, you can also use Affinity Photo, Medibang Paint Pro, Sketchbook, Infinite Painter, PaintStorm, UpStudio Pro, Sketches Pro, Adobe Fresco, Concepts. For graphic design work, you can use Adobe Illustrator, Affinity Designer, Vectornator, AMADINE. So these 4 apps are great at creating vector style graphics. And if you need to work with type or text, go with Adobe Illustrator or Affinity Designer. For the apps that I have mentioned earlier, if there is a desktop version running on Windows or Mac OS, those desktop apps will have all the features, whereas the tablet version of the apps will only have a subset of features. So if you are thinking of moving from desktop software over to the tablet apps, there will be a lot of missing features. For example, this is Adobe Photoshop. There is no menu bar at the top for the commands, for the shortcuts. And many of the controls and settings are hidden within the palettes, which you may have to open and close repeatedly. So this is not as productive compared to using the same software on a desktop. The main reason to get an iPad for me is so that I can draw with the Apple Pencil. If I'm just doing graphic design work that doesn't require hand-drawn illustrations, or if I'm editing photos and videos, I'm just way more productive on a laptop or on a desktop computer. Let's take a look at this graphic design app called AMADINE. So this is a vector illustration app. It's vector, so you can zoom in all the way without any loss of details. And this is an illustration of my baby girl. I actually created this by tracing a photograph, and it took me a very long time to create this, mostly because I'm not that familiar with the app, but it's also due to the fact that many of the controls, the tools are hidden within the palette. So if I need to show the layers palette, I have to click the layers palette to show it. If I want to combine the shapes, I have to select the objects, tap on the icon to get those tools there. If I want to show the layers palette again, I have to tap the layers palette. So I have to keep opening and closing all these palettes. It's not that productive compared to having the palettes on the display at all times. Tablet versions of apps usually have fewer keyboard shortcuts, and that applies here. And for this app, some of the keyboard shortcuts don't even work well due to glitches. So if I know this app well enough and there are enough keyboard shortcuts, I can probably create this illustration under an hour versus the 3 hours that I took. So this is the macOS version of AMADINE, and here I can see all the palettes are open. I have the appearance palette where I can change the stroke or the feel instantly. With the tablet version of this app, I have to open the palette before I can change those things. Here I have the layers palette, which is open all the time, and I have other palettes, and I can add other palettes on the screen as well. So this is just a more productive way to work. And this will apply to Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop as well for desktop versus the tablet app. There are drawing apps where you can have the palettes open and visible at all times and can have multiple palettes on the display. This is Clip Studio Paint. So here you can move the palettes to wherever you want. This is Paint Storm. Here you can have palettes open and move them to wherever you want as well. And this is where Apple Pencil Hover may be useful. So right now I have to expand the palettes by tapping. Hopefully in the future you can just roll over the palette and have it expand automatically. Another app with movable palettes and visible palettes is Art Studio Pro. For the 3 apps that I mentioned earlier, Clip Studio Paint, Art Studio Pro, and Paint Storm, where you can have multiple palettes on the display, those 3 apps will work great on external displays. However, you cannot draw on external displays, and right now you cannot use the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil to control the cursor on the external display. If you can draw on the iPad with the Apple Pencil and use this to control the cursor here, that will be like a major game changer, because now you will be able, in theory, you will be able to use Clip Studio Paint on a 27-inch display and have all the palettes floating by the side, and you can still get a huge amount of canvas to work with while you draw on the iPad. So that's one feature I'm really looking forward to, but I'm not sure if Apple is going to implement that, but if they do, that would be perfect. Another thing I don't quite like about using vector design apps on the iPad is when I click on things, when I want to select objects with the Apple Pencil, I would tap, obviously, but sometimes when I tap to select the object, I may accidentally move the object by a few pixels. And that few pixels will affect alignment, will affect how I combine objects. And I don't get that issue or that problem when I'm working with a mouse with the vector design software on desktops. I cannot use the keyboard and mouse with the tablet version of AMADINE because there are no navigation controls here, because this app was designed for use with touch and fingers. The zoom will work, but there is no hand tool, there is no pen tool, there is no rotate tool, so I can't use keyboard and mouse with this app. But I can use keyboard and mouse with the tablet version of this app. If you need to work with type or text, if you want to create brochures, pamphlet, flyers, newsletters, anything to do with page design or layout, go with Adobe Illustrator or Affinity Designer. Affinity Designer is great because it's a one-time purchase. You can edit photos on the iPad Pro. Adobe Lightroom works great, but I don't really see the advantage of editing photos on the iPad versus on a laptop. The M2 iPad Pro is a very powerful tablet, can be used to edit videos just like the earlier iPad Pros, but I don't edit videos on the iPad Pro because I don't find it to be that productive working on such a small display. Video editing for me works better. I can work faster on a larger display, again because I can see all the palettes by the side and the command bar, the menu bar at the top, and also the tools on screen at all times. If you really want to edit photos and videos on the iPad Pro, I highly recommend you think about how you can import the photos and videos into the iPad, how to manage the files, and how to back up the files. Those are very important. Let's talk about Stage Manager. There are two aspects to Stage Manager. There is the multitasking aspect, and there is the external display support aspect. For multitasking, you can actually get those features with iPad OS 16.1, and those features will be available to older iPads as well. But for the external display support with Stage Manager, you can only get that with the iPads that have the M1 or M2 processors. Let's look at the multitasking features of Stage Manager, which is not on by default. So to turn on Stage Manager, just swipe down from the corner, tap on this little icon here, and now when you launch apps, they will launch into Stage Manager. On the side here are shortcuts to apps that are already open. The dock below with all the apps are visible at all times, so you can use these shortcuts to switch between apps really quickly. And when you don't see the shortcuts by the side, you can just swipe in from the side to see the shortcuts again. You can have multiple windows as well. So let's have Safari on top of Microsoft Edge. And you can switch between the windows. You can also use split screen. I'm not sure how useful this is compared to this split screen that you can get from before. Anyway, let's go back to Stage Manager. Anyway, you can already switch apps by just swiping from the bottom, so I'm not sure how useful Stage Manager is. And usually when I use apps, I usually have the apps open full screen at all times because, I mean, even a 12.9-inch display is kind of small, so I prefer to use my apps full screen at all times. Although I must say that with Stage Manager now, with the icons by the side, switching apps, it's really quick. Because the apps are minimized to a smaller size, this means Stage Manager will work better on larger iPad Pros than on the 11-inch iPad Pros. Multitasking with Stage Manager is actually not a selling point for me. The main selling point of Stage Manager is external display support, and as mentioned earlier, you can only get external display support with iPads that are using the Apple M1 or M2 processors. So Stage Manager is also available on external displays. So let me open up Microsoft Edge and Safari. So I have these two windows side by side. I'm using iPad OS 16.2 beta, so there are many glitches. And right now, it seems that I am unable to adjust the size of the window. So Apple may add more features or tweak the features in the future. But what I really want to show you is the potential of external display. Let's open up Adobe Lightroom. So with some of the apps that can take advantage of external display, you will be able to work with a much larger display. However, the user interface may still be the tablet version, which is to say, using keyboard and mouse to interact with user interface that's designed for touch and fingers can be quite confusing, so it's going to take some time to get used to the new workflow. But the main issue here really is I still need to tap on icons and tools or palettes to expand them. before I can adjust the settings. At the time of making this video, many apps are not optimized for external display yet. For example, with Concepts, you can only use this app for drawing on the iPad, and it will show you the larger view of your artwork here on the external display. This to me is not very useful because I can already see my artwork here. Let's take a look at Photoshop. Same thing, you can only use the app here, and here it will just show you a larger view. If you try to open Photoshop here, notice the glitch where the image is rotated for whatever reason. Let me just quit Photoshop and open it again. Let me just quit all the programs. Oh, notice what happened. I wasn't able to quit Photoshop. Anyway, there are a lot of bugs with iPad OS 16.2 beta. Yeah, so I wasn't able to get, I can't get Photoshop to work. Let me try another app, maybe try Adobe Illustrator and see what happens. Here, I am not able to resize the window, and I cannot expand the app to full screen because there is no shortcut here for me to expand or maximize this to full screen. So right now, external display support with many of the apps is just not there yet, but I can definitely see the potential. Let's take a look at Affinity Photo. This is how Affinity Photo looks. It's just this small window, and you can't maximize this. It doesn't work yet. So Stage Manager provides you with an extra workspace, and this is definitely more useful compared to the mirror mode that you can get with older iPads, and mirror mode to me it's really useless. I did not do any measurements for the battery life of the iPad Pro, but I don't have any issues with battery life. Based on the battery life that I get from all the iPad Pros that I've used, it's usually around 8 to 10 hours depending on the brightness of the display. If you are actually using the tablet under the sun where the brightness is at 100%, then the battery life may be just 5 to 6 hours. When you are just drawing on the tablet is not going to get hot, it's not even going to get warm. If you're using the iPad Pro with a portable display, like what I'm using right now, this display is going to drain the battery life much faster, so that's something you should know. If you're using a desktop monitor, then the monitor is not going to drain the battery life, and if that monitor has power delivery, you can even charge the iPad Pro while it's connected. Alright, to conclude, the M2 iPad Pro is a fantastic tablet for creating hand-drawn illustrations. For graphic design work, the main issues that I have would be the features for many of the graphic design apps are just a subset of the features that you can get with the desktop apps, and the workflow with graphic design apps on the tablet is not as productive compared to desktop apps. And if you want to use graphic design apps on the external display, there may be some usability issues because those apps were designed for touch screens and finger gestures. They may not work well with keyboard and mouse. If you are thinking of upgrading, well, if you are using the M1 iPad Pro, I don't think there is any compelling reason to upgrade to the M2 model, because you will still be able to get external display support. You just won't get the Apple Pencil Hover feature. If you're using an iPad that's not using the Apple M1 or M2 processor, the main reason to upgrade to this new model will probably be for the external display support, provided you have use for this. And this is actually quite useful because this does improve productivity significantly simply by giving you an extra workspace to work on. If you are deciding between the M1 and M2 iPad Pro because the previous model is now cheaper, well, if you can get good savings with the earlier model, that may still be a good deal because you will still be able to get Stage Manager external display support with the M1 iPad Pro. The lack of a cursor beneath the pen tip has not prevented me from creating the artworks that I have created. Same applies to other artists who have made careers out of drawing or creating art using an iPad. So if you are thinking of upgrading from an older iPad to this newer M2 iPad Pro, well, you really have to ask yourself whether or not you need to see that cursor and whether you are using any brushes that will take advantage of a cursor preview. I will put out another review for the M2 iPad Pro in the future, talking specifically about Stage Manager external display support and Apple Pencil hover mode when those two features are working well and without any glitches. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get notified when that video appears. Thanks for watching. I hope this review is useful. See you guys again. Bye.